So welcome to 10.3, and we're going to start with a Polish poster overview, kind of a lecture, but more just like a history and give us some grounding on what this is. As I was just saying, if you've taken any art history classes or art survey classes, you will be introduced to like the big ones. You know, you'll talk about Art Nouveau and Art Deco and the Renaissance and Byzantine and things like that. Something that doesn't really get covered much unless it's like a special topics class would be Polish poster design. It's one of my favorite movements for a lot of reasons. So I wanted to introduce it. I thought it was kind of topical since we're right in the middle of poster design. Maybe give you some ideas, some other directions where you can take things. Nobody's fault, but we have grown up in an age that we're inundated with like media and posters specifically. And, you know, growing up in the time that we did, I'm probably older than everybody here, but I remember, you know, movie posters used to look a different way. You know, like they say that the golden era of Hollywood movie posters was like the 60s, 70s, and 80s because they had fine artists working on them. I don't know if it was because of the digital era, but something happened around the late 90s and certainly into the aughts and the teens where this design got kind of, and I'm not saying this is not, I'm painting with very broad strokes right now. There are always diamonds in the rough. I mean, there's every decade, every year has a handful of posters that's like, wow, that's awesome. But by and large, if you look at the movie posters that are most famous, they're really stale because it's like it's the same thing. I think what happened is somewhere back, and let's just say 97 arbitrarily, you know, Photoshop really got some traction and people figured out that I've said floating heads. What I'm referring to, and just Google floating heads posters. You guys have seen hundreds of these things where it would be the three main actors at the top, boom, boom, boom. And then their heads would have a loose lasso selection cut out, boom, boom, boom. And then, you know, like a still or something about the movie, a little bit of the exposition kind of in the lower half. Could be an action scene, uh, comet hitting the earth, car crash, giant alligator chasing somebody. You insert whatever thing it is that kind of sums up the movie. Big title at the bottom, a little tagline somewhere along there, and then all the, you know, post credits. And it was just that over and over and over again. And it's just, you know, maybe once it was kind of novel. And if there's a reason for it, okay. But it seemed like poster design got really, really lazy. You know, like they soaked all their money into other facets of advertising and they really left posters to the tail end. And, you know, it really looks like some junior designer went at it. And they're lame. They're really, really lame. It didn't always used to be that way. And, you know, I talked about just now the golden era of Hollywood. Well, before that, you know, jumping back a couple decades, things were really interesting in Poland. So let's start there. I'd like to share a lecture with you. It's a PowerPoint. This is also in your, I think it's in class assets. If you dig around in one of those drop downs, you'll find it. Now, I'd like to actually show this as a Google slide. My fear is if I go full screen, I'm going to rely on someone just to chime in real quick and say, we can see you. Problem that's going to happen if this does work, I'm going to lose the visibility of Zoom. I won't see the chat. I won't see you guys. So if you have questions, if you want me to slow down, if you want to intervene, you're going to have to unmute yourself. But first things first, let's see if this actually works. So let's share my screen. Okay, so you should be seeing a Chrome browser right now. And we'll get to Tyler Stout in a moment, but not this. Here we go. All right, so someone do me a favor. Oh, wait, never mind. I can still see Zoom. Great, awesome. Great, this is awesome. So never mind. Here we go. So Polish poster design. Real quick, is anybody familiar with like the Polish poster movement from like the 60s to the 80s? It's okay if you're not. I'm just kind of curious. I better get the chat pod out. When I first saw this, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. It had kind of like everything that I was looking for insofar as poster design goes. You be the judge. If it's not your cup of tea, fine, but at least you'll be aware that this thing did occur in Eastern Europe during this time period. So, like the head slide starts here, I thought this is kind of a good way of introducing what this is and why it was really important to Poland. In fact, my type 2 teacher was Polish, and she's made it a mission, like a lot of Poles have. They have gone back to Poland and tried to scoop up as much as this as they can because they know that it's worth a lot of money and it's continuing to grow in money. If you see one of these posters that you like, just take a screenshot of it, put it into Google image search, find out reprints of these things. I mean, there's some of these that I really want, but reprints of them go for hundreds of dollars. The originals have to be just astronomical. So, culturally, it was very important to Poland because this was really the only outlet for artists to do art. It was under a communist rule at the time. And if you're familiar with anything under communism during that time period, I'm talking about like 40s, 50s, 60s, up into the 70s, pre-Berlin Wall, everything really had to be for the party. And I don't mean like party like woohoo. I mean party as in the Communist Party. If it wasn't there to serve the labor force and to enforce propaganda, it was deemed irrational and degenerate art, and they would not fund it. And worse than that, sometimes. So these posters became like a bastion of hope for artists where they flocked to it. These weren't people that were into movies. These are people that weren't into necessarily graphic design. These were proper fine artists, properly trained in all those tools and skills. They just happened to gravitate towards this because they were given free reign. Good. We have to move these chat pods around a little bit. Um, so like I said before, before the globalization, posters look the same in every country. Polish artists were creating their own version for an internal market. I think I brought up last class, and this is absolutely true. Um, a lot of the artists that worked on these never saw the movie. They certainly, maybe they saw it afterwards, in VHS or something like that. But when they were working on the movie posters, most of them had really no concept of what they were designing, which is really a kind of a cool, happy accident. They would just be given a snippet or a very, very brief synopsis. They wouldn't even know who the actors were. The only reason that they were given possibly the director or the actor was just to put it in the title, and that was about it. So they were really allowed to interpret the subject matter in any way they saw fit. Sometimes it's really cool, and sometimes it's so strange that it's like also really cool, but sometimes it also misses the mark completely. This is the image for the movie Cabaret. I've never seen the movie, but I'm aware of what it is. It's Nazi Germany, and I'm sure that most people know what a cabaret is, but really odd take on what this is, and visually very striking, very minimal, great typography, just a cool look. What you should do is if you do like these posters, juxtapose this, find the Polish version of Cabaret, and then take a look at what the American counterpart looks like. Vastly different. So not film posters, but just Polish posters goes back to before the turn of the century. So we're talking like 1890s. And there were painters at that point. The photography did exist, but it wasn't being used in any type of advertising capacity outside of maybe some editorial stuff that you would find in periodicals and newspaper. But even then, it was so much in its infancy, and the technology was so not there yet. That painting, drawing, illustration, these became the go-to modes for advertisement. There's a bunch of names here that honestly I don't really recognize. I don't start to recognize the artist until around the 1860s. And if you're curious about those, just again Google. I'm sorry, I said 1860s, 1960s. If you like some of this stuff, to me, the watershed it would be like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and that's 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Uh, Jan Jna Lenica, if I'm pronouncing that right, is a big one. Uh, Again, a very cursory Google will bring up the 3 or 4 heavy hitters, but this is a much later image, so this might not be the best one to tie with the information in the slide, but you're already kind of getting a sense of the painterly aspect to it. Something else that I'll try to point out as it comes up, take a look at the typography. This is type that is rendered by hand, which I'm a huge fan of. Digital typesetting clearly didn't exist until the 1980s. And even then it was pretty primitive, but there was offset printing that would be used on American posters. The Polish really resisted that in favor of a more organic type treatment. So this is kind of the beginning of Polish poster design. Now you might recognize these aesthetics, and it's because the Polish are borrowing heavy from other countries that are doing really kind of incredible things when it comes to advertising. And the 3 big ones that I'll point out would be Art Nouveau, the movement in France. People I'm sure are familiar with like a Toulouse-Lautrec and Alphonse Mucha or Mucha. I don't know how that's pronounced. The Vienna Secessionists, that would be kind of like an offshoot of like your Gustav Klimts, and then eventually into expressionism like Egon Schiele, and then Japanese woodcuts, which also were influenced by Art Nouveau. So those 3 movements concurrently, the Polish were like using as the foundation. So they would take that, and early on, it really you could put the image on the left right next to a Vienna Secessionist, and unless you spoke the language, you'd be hard pressed to tell them apart. So it's almost like a one-to-one copy, but at least it's on their radar. They're picking good references to steal from. That's where this thing began. So here's where things start to really kind of heat up. It's between World War I and World War II. Again, I'm not familiar with Stefan Norblum, but I do recognize this image, and this is classic like post-Soviet constructivism. So, or maybe what you'd call like Soviet realism. If you're familiar with any type of constructivism, it starts off like very hard edge, very geometric, solid color fields, and then it kind of moves into a little bit more of a realism, a heightened realism, expression realism, painterly style, just like this. And the 2 artist designers from Russia are completely escaping me. Should have done a little research before this, but Elwitsky is one, and Rodchenko would be the other one. Okay, so back on track. But that's what's happening here. And it's not so much that they like this, it's that they're getting kind of squeezed by the governments at this point. It's got to be for the party, it's got to be for the labor, it's got to support, this idea, and that's how you kind of get constructivism. So it'll stay like this for a while, but you can start to see that they're playing around with typography. The Bauhaus has already kind of come and starting to go a little bit. So you're starting to see these clean sans serif typefaces, real thick, almost based off of like your Gill Sans and your Futura. They're doing much more solid type layout. What's going on in Switzerland would be the new typographic movement, which is really clean, very organized, real crisp typography. They're seeing that. They haven't quite made that transition to like their own style yet. They haven't brought in the painterly style, which really nobody has. Okay, so here we are, and this is kind of what I want to focus on. The 50s and 60s into the 80s, and we'll end with the 80s. This is the golden age watershed. All advertisements, everything, news, you name it. It's really controlled by the state. I mean, they are definitely on Soviet lockdown at this point in time. It's full blown communism. So somehow, and it might be in the notes a little bit, I don't totally understand it myself, but somehow Poland got free reign to say that movie posters, just this one weird niche genre, would be allowed to kind of do what they wanted to do. I think it's because a lot of these films, in fact, most of these films that you'll see, really had nothing to do with Poland. It was a way to make money off of other people's ideas. So apparently the Communist Party was okay with that. Clearly they must have been because it happened. But it's just odd and kind of fascinating that this would have been the thing that they said, okay, that's fine to do. Like Western art, Western culture is degenerate anyways. Go ahead and make your degenerate art. It's fine. So these are the two big communities here, the Polish Film and the Movie Rentals Central. All right, now we're just going to take a look, and there's going to be very little type throughout, and we're just going to take a look at some very famous movie posters. Now, unless you speak or can read Polish, none of this is going to make any sense, but what you can do is look at the names to kind of get an idea of the time period. Jane Fonda, Lee Marvin, this would have been from the 60s. I'm assuming this is Cat Ballou, but like, again, take a look at this versus what the American version looks like. So different, very expressionistic. It's just got like a really, really strange, odd feel to it. It's almost like, I don't want to say surrealism, but it's surreal in the sense that I know what these posters look like. Like I've seen these movies, I've seen the VHS cover boxes. When you rent them from Max or Amazon, they'll still have the posters the same as the cover, that little imprint, that, what would that be? Like a 400 pixel by 250 pixel. Like that's the image from the movie. Take a look at that versus this, really strange, striking colors, bold typography, really inventive. And you can tell, clearly it's because artists are working on this, that they are trained in that field. Yeah, I mean, I really adore the way that they put these together. So if nothing else, this might be, at least you can say, well, I went through it. It's not for me, fine. But best case, you look at these and start to get some ideas of like, oh, that could be a poster. It doesn't have to look photorealistic. We're so in the era of, hey, we paid a lot of money for Brad Pitt. You better put Brad Pitt's face on that poster. Well, you don't necessarily have to do that. So strange. It does appear, though, that the type layout is getting a bit more structured, like they're working a little bit more on the grid. Not always, but in these particular examples, we're seeing some more of that. So here's your King Kong, and nothing against the King Kong poster. It's a great painted, um, I don't know who the artist was, but it's really nice, but this is very different. Like most people might recognize Schwarzenegger from the Terminator. And again, nothing against the Terminator poster. I like it, but man, I would pay up for something like this. It's very different. A few of these I do recognize because I've done this lecture several times, and I do recognize some of the names. So this is Alfred Hitchcock. It's hard to say because James Stewart was in so many, and so was Kim Novak. Vertigo, possibly. I'm only saying that because of the spirals. But again, and if you look at the Vertigo American counterpart, that's designed by Saul Bass. That's fantastic. I mean, that might be in the top 100 movie posters. This one, I would say, would probably give it a run for its money. Roman Polanski. Man with the Golden Key, I believe, is the image on the left. The image on the right is The Birds by Hitchcock. It's really just a roughed up, if you think about what was hot in graphic design in the 90s, you've got the premier designer then would have been David Carson, who kind of started grunge. not the music genre, but the graphic design trend. This is proto grunge, in my opinion. This looks like a almost like a punk show poster. It's really roughed up, really distressed. It's got all the iconography there. It's sparse, just white on black with repeated type. I would assume that this word meat is bird, so it's just like bird, 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 bird to kind of reinforce, the repetition builds up. There's a lot of birds. Um, Again, I only know these because of the actors and the director. So we have Apocalypse Now here. Was this in the movie? None of this was in any of the movies. They never saw the movies. So they're just kind of like winging it. But if you look at this versus the Apocalypse Now poster, this just blows it out of the water. To me, this says it all. Like I'm not even sure to definitely have to see the movie at that point. The image on the right, I always, like when we're in person, I would ask kids, what is this? What are we looking at? And see if they could guess the what movie it is. This is a great example of one that might be a little bit misleading. That's the movie Alien. They didn't know what the alien looked like. So that's what they came up with. Very weird, um, cool, but you know, is not a literal look into. I would like to have seen what the artist or designer thought when they actually saw the movie, if they saw the movie, about their poster, like, ooh, wow, that was different. But pretty strange looking image. So here we are in the 80s, and we've only got a couple slides left, so we're almost done here. I pulled this one up. I really do like this. The painting technique is fantastic. Those they're not quite complementary colors. Blue and red are not opposite the color wheel, but you have a very cold color palette juxtaposed with a very hot color palette. And man, those lips and that lipstick just they pop. Those become focal points. However, if you've ever seen the movie Tootsie or vaguely aware of it, it's a very lighthearted comedy. This looks like a serial killer movie. So again, probably sending some of the wrong signals, but no less striking. You might see this poster and be like, wow, I gotta really see that movie. And then when you walk out of the theater, like, that didn't look anything like that poster. Maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't. Uh, the 80s saw the end of it. For a couple different reasons. So they were marked by society's strong opposition to the increasingly oppressive communist rule. Dot dot dot. We know how that ended. Communism fell, and in doing so, kind of it ended this. It ended that pocket. So now artists were like really got free to go back to whatever they wanted to do, and that market just kind of collapsed. Unfortunately, I mean, good for Poland, but bad for alternative poster designs. We'll end with this one. I think this is so funny. This is Jaws 2. Like how do you do a sequel to the poster Jaws? Well, I guess you add another set of Jaws onto it. Again, this looks like some really weird sci-fi movie, but that was their rendering for it. So a little bit different, kind of funny, but did it miss the mark? I don't know. You tell me. So that is kind of like Pictionary. Yeah, yeah, right. That's my spiel on Polish poster design. If you like it, spend some more time with it. We didn't even scratch the surface by a long shot. So there are tons and tons. One of my absolute favorites is Chinatown. Love that movie. Love their poster. All right. So now that we got that out of the way, let's bounce over to Photoshop. There's a few other things that I want to talk about in regards to typography, some effects that we didn't get to, and some layer styles that we didn't get to. After that, I want to show you how to save out the different versions of your poster design. And in that, we need to talk about smart objects. But let's start with type. Let me share my screen. This time we'll do Photoshop. All right. Since we were talking about Polish poster design, I'm going to use this as a demo for this. These two well, this is what's called a mock-up. right? And I would like you guys to use this mockup for your final submission, unless you find another mockup. And there's lots of mockups out there. They're free. If you just Google free Photoshop mockup theater poster, you might have to dig around a little bit. A lot of them say free, but it's a scam. But there are free ones out there. And Adobe will occasionally, like if I go to File, New, and let's do Art and Illustration. Let's see what this month is in the freebie section. Watercolor texture, that could work. Those are nice, by the way. Here's a pretty cool glowing effect if you need some typography stuff. I love these halftone textures. Guys, this stuff comes with Adobe. I would grab all of it. Every month I would log in and see what's out there. Set of three circle gradients, photo dust and scratches, shiny metal 3D. Like, you could make this stuff. I mean, clearly you could make it. Somebody made it, but why go to the trouble? Like if I need a vintage neon glow, boom, I'm going to grab it, download it. I might change it around, probably should, so it doesn't look so stock. But man, does that really get 80, 90% of the work done for me? So pretty nice stuff here. I've got a lot of them. Dreamy haze text, that's cool. Let's take a look at print and see what we got in there. Flyer.
Sorry to interrupt, but to your last point with the free objects on arts and illustration, do those save to like our Adobe account? Like if we save them, or are they just there?
Good question. I see what you're saying. They will save wherever you save them to. So here, I'll grab
Okay.
one. I'm looking for a poster frame is really what I'm looking for. Everything is Halloween branded right now. That totally makes sense. But again, if I need a Halloween party flyer, I might grab this just to, it's got some type already in place. Might save a little time. Okay. This won't be a great movie poster because it's broadside, it's landscape, it's long, but I'm going to go to download this. It might take a second. Now, real quick, I'll show you guys how a mockup works, and then I'll go back through with you and show you how mockup works. I would encourage you guys to follow along, not necessarily with this retail sign, but here, let me open this. So here it is, all mixed up. This file here, indoor advertising, this is in Blackboard, and it's under assets. It's where I put the brushes. So this and this are on Blackboard. I would pull them both down. That way you guys can follow along with the demo. And if you have any questions, if anything weird comes up, you can let me know. But eventually you'll replace this with your artwork to put here. To your point, Melissa, so here's my file. Where is it? It's right now it's nowhere. So I would just save. And if you want to save it locally, save it locally. If you want to save it to the cloud, save it to the cloud. What I like to do, I don't want to stop sharing right now and share Google, but I just got a Google Drive folder called it's called Adobe Freebies. And inside of that folder, I've got AI, ID, AE, and PS for the 4 programs that I use a lot. And inside of my Photoshop freebies would be print, web, something else. And inside of print would be posters, marquees, trifolds, anything that's print related. And I got a folder called branding, and that's where I have my shoe boxes. I got one for packaging, and I just dump all of these free assets up into that folder. It's not housed by Adobe, it's housed on my Google Drive. Or you could save it locally to your computer, your C drive, your G drive, or you can save it to, I don't want to grab it, but an external hard drive. And that's not a bad idea either. Just create a folder, call it whatever you want to call it, and start grabbing the stuff every month. Because at some point, you're going to need something. And instead of scrambling around trying to photograph a shoebox, just go to your packaging. You've got your shampoo bottle, your perfume bottle, your hot sauce bottle, your shoebox. Oh, shoebox, boom, grab it, throw it on there, good to go. So real quick, here's how this thing wants to work. When they're designed well, and if they're from Adobe, they are designed well. let's drop an image in here. Let's get image of Sigourney Weaver's face. Control C, jump back. And you don't have to do this with me, but I just want to show you real quick. Control V, Control T, scale this up. I absolutely love smart objects, and for portfolio purposes, showing contextual design, very important. Save it, close it. Now take a look at the image. Boom. So your design is now, I don't know, Miracle Mile, Magnificent Mile, someplace that or your client, let's say that it's Chanel or whatever you're doing, can see it and be like, oh yes, I see. I don't just see a flat JPEG in PowerPoint, or you don't just email them that. You can show them, hey, this is what it would look like in an environment. This is what it would look like on a subway LED. This is what it would look like on a billboard. This is what it would look like, on a gallon of milk. So they've got these mock-ups for everything. So that's that. I didn't find a billboard or a better mock-up than this. The reason that this works well, it looks like it's at a mall, fine. A lot of malls do have theaters. Some malls have theaters, but this is vertical and your posters are vertical, so it should fit into this pretty well. We'll get to this in a second. All right, on to typography. All right, I'm moving along with this a little bit more. It's got some mistakes, but the first thing I want to talk about is this right here, which is my tagline. I came up with a tagline, and by me, I mean ChatGPT did. Problem is, it's too wide. So there's a couple things I could do. I could do a hard return on the and drop it down to 2 lines. That could work. And if I just double click in here, hit hard return, okay, it all fits, and maybe that looks okay. Maybe it's got that pyramid look to it, which I'm not opposed to. But in my mind, I really saw this as being 1 line, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to shrink it down. So we'll go to the properties. It's at 72-point type, and I noticed that the tracking is at 50. And this particular font, Caslin, it doesn't look good at 50. It looks weird. So I'm going to bring that down. In fact, I might even go negative to like -10. That right there got me out of Dutch. At least it's all on there. Now, this to me is a bit too tense. It's a little too close to the side. My fear is when it goes to print, if it went to print, it could get chopped off. So I really have to work with a little bit more padding or margins. So that helped out tremendously, but 72 is still a bit too much. So let's try to take 10 points down and go down to 62. Okay, that looks, it definitely fits. So I'm okay with that. Scooch it up a little bit. And I think I'm okay there. All right, a few things that we didn't talk about. We talked about the size, we talked about the leading, we talked about the kerning, we talked about the tracking. Something that we didn't get into though was this. You got a little kebab down here at the bottom. And if you click on this, it's going to reveal your sub options. Oops. So right now I've just got those 4 properties. If I click on the kebab, it reveals about 3 more. And these 3 are pretty handy. First, you have vertical scale. Then you have horizontal scale. And then you have a baseline shift. Let's explain what these are real quick. Vertical scale will make characters taller. Horizontal does the opposite. It makes them longer. Baseline shift I'll end with. But right now, you'll notice that this font actually, to me, it looks kind of tall. And it's a little hip right now to have typefaces. When I say X height, that is the height of the font. It's kind of a trendish thing to have tall X heights where you got like kind of tall, thin characters. A lot of it has to do with like chalk art, hand done typography tends to be a little bit more elongated. I don't like it here. I think it's taken up too much room, and it doesn't need to be that way. And I noticed that for whatever reason, I didn't do this. It must have just remembered one of my last settings that I wanted to do it. It's got a positive 128. These two values here should always be at 100. Always start with 100. If you see anything weird, go to the kebab, show more options, and bring that back down. And now take a look at what happens to my type. Shit, see how it like kind of crushed down? Here, I'll go back to 150. I want you guys looking up here. The craft is alive. So I'll go to 150, put something exaggerated. See how it like really stretches it out? Now you might say, well, I like it like that. Okay, cool. I mean, that's how you could do that. But kind of like putting strokes on typography, anytime that you alter the typographer, the designer of the typeface's idea, you're probably hurting legibility. And I do think that this did not help anything. So I'm going to bring that back down to 100. And that's what the typeface was designed to look like. Cool. All right. Now that it's down to 100, I think I could actually make it wider a little bit. You know, I could increase the size. So I'll take 62 up to 68. And guys, this is type grooming 101. Add a little bit, take a little bit away. Change this, now I can change this. Just trying to make it look right. Let's do horizontal scale just to say that we did it. So we're at 100. We'll do 200. You see how wide it gets? Looks terrible, but that's the way that that works. Now, occasionally, you will want to do this. You'll have a reason for it. That's where it's at. Baseline shift is interesting. What baseline shift does, if you've taken your type class, I think Kelly was saying that she was the one that was taking all these classes. Kelly, you're probably familiar with baseline, right? That's what your type sits on. So if I was to pull down a guide right now, that line of type is sitting on that cyan guide. That would be the baseline. Descenders go below the baseline. Well, what if I wanted a character or two to sit above the baseline or below the baseline? That's what this jitter does. It's pretty cool. If I'm ever doing what I call ransom typography, you know, you've seen those movies or TV shows where there's a ransom note and the kidnapper doesn't want to use their own handwriting. So what do? They cut out little magazine, like they'll use an M from this and a D from this and stuff. And it's all over the place. It's all crazy looking. We can emulate that with a baseline shift. So here with my Black Magic Gorilla, I kind of want to make it look just a little bit off. It's a little bit too clean right now. So what I'm going to do is double click here. Now you can do entire lines. You can do entire sentences. I like to do just like letter by letter, and I don't want to shift them too much. I don't want it to be too zany. Just want it to make it look like, you know, if I'm trying to emulate an old type press, you know, things aren't perfect. Hopefully one day, if you guys get into typography, you get to work a letter press, like a wood letter press or a metal letter press. Those are harder to find. There's a really, really good type museum in Two Rivers, Wisconsin called Hamilton Wood Type. If you're getting into it and you're like, man, I'd like to explore the history of it, it's about 4 hours away. I know it's a hike, but get a hotel room, spend the day. You'll get dirty. You'll smell the old weird solvents. It's a lot of fun. All right, so I'm going to take maybe the L and I'm going to drop it down a couple points. So here we go. We'll put a negative. I'll do something severe so you can see what it's going to look like. So I'll do it a -8. And you see how that L now sits lower? It's 8 points lower. Now that's a bit much. I think that looks too much. So let's try that again. Select that L. And instead of that -8, let's just do a -2. Just a subtle little drop down. If I push one down, generally I'll push another one up. So maybe I'll end with that K, and this will go a +1, 2, maybe 3. You can see that it's not something that you would look at right away and be like, whoa, those letters are all over the place. But it's just enough to say, you know, this isn't quite right. Where I really like doing it is when we have two letters the same next to one another, like the two L's. Here's where you can really kind of drive it home and say, all right, if I was to give one of these a positive, do a 3, because it's sitting next to a duplicate, now you start to see it. And let's take our G, and maybe we'll drop that down a point or two. Do a -3. just like that. Very subtle, but it's there. So that's baseline shift. All right, we've covered all of the tools inside of the type tool panel now. So we can close that out. Get creative, see what you can do. The last thing that I want to talk about is how to add effects. Now, you can add effects to anything. If I was to pull out a shape right now. Now, here's a great example, a word balloon. I use word balloons for my comics all the time. Let's give it a fill. So hopefully you guys can see that. I'll change it to red so you can really see it. Nice. It does have its own stroke attached to it. So this would be one way to say, all right, I'm going to separate it from the background a little bit. But what if it was on a different color background and I want to really, really kind of bring that stroke out a little bit more? What could I do? That's where your layer effects come into play. I mean, we could probably teach layer effects for a while, but I would imagine most of you have like seen these before. Let's go just a little bit deeper. And then maybe on Tuesday, we'll run an entire type demo. I'm going to link to this wavy type effect, and it's just got a bunch of layer styles on it. But here they are. It's under layer effects. There's another way of getting to this. If you just double click on the layer, not the name. If you double click on the name, you'll rename it. If you double click on the thumbnail, you'll enter a different kind of mode depending what kind of layer it is. But if you click up to the right, it brings up the layer style. So either way, this or effect. I usually just do this, double click, because the effect here asks me to immediately choose which one I want. It doesn't really matter. You can just go to blend options and it's the exact same thing. But I usually just double click on the layer. Here we go. So here's the name of the layer. Here's your blending options. We talked about this before, blend if, when we did the fire demo. You can set the blend mode right here if you wanted to, as opposed to in the layers. Doesn't matter. You can set the opacity here if you wanted to. All of this stuff you can do in your layers palette. It's the stuff off to the left, the styles that I want to focus in on. All right, let's add a stroke to this. All right, so right now it's a white stroke. I can't see it because it's white on white. So let's change the color a bit and we'll do red, real bright red. Let's change the size. You can see that now that stroke is going outside of the default black stroke that was on the shape. Okay, that's cool. You can play around with its opacity, just the effect. You can set where it goes. Let's change the color to yellow. And this time, let's move it to the inside. So now it's actually superseding that stroke on the outside. So I'm going to go back to the outside, change that color again. And I think I'm going to stack another effect on it. I want it to close it off with another black stroke. So I will add another stroke. This one will be black, again, set to the outside. All I got to remember is it needs to go a higher value. This first effect was at 76 pixels. This one has to be bigger than 76. Otherwise, it's just going to be eclipsed by that first stroke. And it could look something like that. So kind of an interesting word bubble. It's not just, hey, here's a white balloon. Here's a white balloon now that has a black stroke. Okay, that's some nice contrast that will set out from whatever background. But we could go further and say, all right, well, here's a white balloon with a black stroke, with a white stroke, and another black stroke. And you could just do this ad infinite. I don't think that's actually an expression. You can do this as many times as you want. So that's not really what I want. In fact, I don't want this word balloon period, but that at least got us talking about where these effects are. So I'm going to put an effect on my black magic gorilla here. All right, first things first, it's time to drop in a color treatment here. I always kind of saw this as a red poster. So we'll start with a solid color. And let's grab a red. I don't want to go too berserk. Like a darkish red. Hard to see because this needs to be set to multiply. All right, so it's definitely got a look now. Getting there, let's say that. Now, what to do about my headline? I have to be a bit careful because this is a distressed typeface. So any effect that I apply to it could get weird quick. Any font or object that you have that has actual holes in it, here's what I'm talking about. You see how this font is designed to have like little distress, little pieces like etched out and chipped out. If I put a stroke on this, I'll do it. Watch how weird this looks. Let's find that type. Let's do effect and we'll do stroke. Now, remember that same color from last time. Let's do white so we can see it. Okay. Bring down the scale some. That actually isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It just kind of filled in those cracks. So, yeah, I got lucky. I didn't think that that would happen. That's not horrible. I'm okay-ish with that. I usually don't like strokes on type. So maybe I'll keep it. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to double click on it. So the stroke is enabled. It will remember all of its parameters. If I click on the word stroke, it will remember the color, the opacity, the size, and all that stuff. I'm just going to disable the visibility. I'm just going to turn that off for a second. And then if I want to come back to it, I can just say, all right, well, let's see what that looked like again. Okay, cool. Instead, what I'm going to start with is a drop shadow. Now, drop shadows are a lot like filters. Everybody's tried it at least once. Some people have tried it a lot more than once. So let's see what that looks like. All right, so it's blue and it's offset to the lower right. I'm going to change all that stuff. So I'm going to click on the word drop shadow and let's take a look at its parameters. All right, so I definitely don't want blue. That's a horrible, when you talk about color vibration, that's what we're talking about. That looks weird. So let's change that to white. Because again, the idea here is I want to try to promote legibility more than anything. If it needs to be red, it needs to be red. And this needs to be red. Second, I want to make it look cool. I want to make it stand out. So that's where kind of I'm at right now. So I'm going to drop the distance down a wee bit. And I think the angle is okay. It's at 135. That's usually a default for drop shadows. They usually want to drag down to the lower right. Maybe to throw things off a little bit instead of looking so like, oh, that's the default drop shadow parameter. Maybe I'll kick it off to the other end. Does look good on kind of the angle there. Actually, you know, I just got lucky. 135 was good. I'm gonna key that in. Don't know if I can do much better than that. I like the opacity at 100%. Zoom out a bit. Feel like it's starting to really, in my mind anyways, look like it fits that time period. Like it fits the 1880s into like the early like 1910s. It's got that look. It's starting to look a little bit sinister. You know, is this a horror movie? Is it a thriller? Is it a period piece? Is it all three? It's kind of got that look a little bit. Still need to mess around with the colors and things like that, but we're getting there. I could try now, see what that stroke looks like on top of it. That stroke completely obliterates my drop shadow. So I am going to take this and bring this down to 2, see what that does for it. Not much. Go up to 4. I don't know. I almost feel like the stroke in some ways looks better than the drop shadow. You know what? Both of them together, now I can see where they're working together. The drop shadow doesn't add a whole lot because it's got to compete with the stroke, but it is there. And it's adding a little bit of gravity underneath all those letters. So yeah, that might be okay. Choose okay. Now let's open a, actually, I'll just throw in a big piece of type here that has nothing to do with anything. The reason I'm doing this is because this particular font won't benefit from a couple of the other effects that I'm going to do. It won't work. For these, I really need more of a sans serif or a slab serif. So let's just throw in Rockwell. Remember last class when I was talking about members of the family? Rockhead, what? No, Rockwell. Look how many members it's got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's not even the entire family. That's just the ones that I've got. So 10 members of the family, not bad. I do not want condensed. I'm going to go with bold. I'm sure everybody in here has used Rockwell at some point in time. It's good font, real good font. But it, for some reason, has been catching this 128 vertical scale. I could tell already it's just too tall. So I might need to blow up my preferences and see what's up. All right, now that I got this, let's talk about some of the other type effects. Zoom into it so we can see it. And I'm going to turn off some of these background layers. They're starting to compete a bit. All right. One of the big ones, especially for type, but it is on other things, would be your bevel and emboss. So let's get it out of the way. So I've got my type layer selected. Okay. It should work with black, but if not, I'll change the color. Effect. Let's do the old obligatory bevel and emboss. So when you need to make things look like they're carved in stone, either into stone or extruding out of stone, this is what you do. You got a lot of options here. Feel free to play around with all of them. Just key in on one of these letters here. The depth will be one of the bigger. Now that I'm looking at it, I think we do need to change the color. So let's do that. We'll do gray should be good in that it will show, you can almost see a little bit. Let's go back to it. So once you have an effect applied, it'll be attached to the bottom here. So if you want to adjust that particular effect, just click on the word and it'll bring back up its parameters. All right, so look to the left and the right. I'm going to do the depth, much more severe, and the size. So there we go. Does it make it look like it's pounded into sheet metal? Yeah, kind of. And if you need to do that effect, maybe you're working on an advertisement for rivets or runners for a truck or something, this is how you do it, and this is how they do it. And then you just play around with all these different settings. Softens the edges. Maybe you want it harder, so it's more chiseled. You can change the direction. You can change the technique. This one's smooth, chisel hard. Oh yeah, chisel soft. I'll go back to chisel hard. I'm not going to go through all these sliders, folks. You can do it. If this is an effect that you like, but you really need to dial it in, go through all of these, see what all of them do. You get a lot of weird stuff with gloss contour. I know that one of the type demos that we used to do back in the day would be Mercury. Like, in order to go through every nuance of this dialog box to try to make liquid mercury, you would play around with these gloss contours. So I don't remember which one it is. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, it's kind of got that chrome look to it a little bit. No. And maybe it is this one. I don't know. You guys be the judge. I've gotten to the point now where I think that these effects are kind of hokey, or this effect is kind of hokey. However, that said, occasionally a client will want to, maybe you're working for a brewery, pub or something, and they want their new product to look like it was burned into the side of a barrel. This is how you'll do it. You just have to play around with the settings. All right, let's turn off bevel and emboss for a moment and talk about a few others. Inner glow is cool. Inner glow, this would be how you do your neon. We'd want to, let's do that. Let's make neon. All right, but for neon, I don't think you really want Rockwell. Rockwell is not a very neon-y font. We want something a lot more thin. And I did see that. What was that, Rockhead? No. There was a script that I saw. Oh. Let me just grab a script here. Gotta move the chat pod. I don't want to spend too much time with this. Here we go. Yeah, it's too thin. Great. All right. So why a script for neon? neon is one of those materials that it has to have a continuous line. There can't be breaks in it. So scripts work well for a neon effect. All right, so let's start here. We don't want the bevel and emboss, but I can go back to my effects. And I realize I just lost the chat pod. Oh, sorry guys. If I don't see if you type something in the chat and you don't hear a response within like 2-3 minutes, just unmute yourself. You're not gonna throw me off or bother me. It's for whatever reason, sometimes I do something and I lose the chat. Is the bevel and emboss better for a serif font? I don't know. As opposed to a sans serif? No, not necessarily. I'll give you an example. Gladiator movies. They've been popular since the movie Gladiator, I guess, maybe before that. But take a look at any Gladiator poster after 2000, after 1995. There's a very good chance that they used Trajan, and there's a very good chance that they've used bevel and emboss to make it look like it's iron or copper, you know. And all that is a serif font that's got, I mean, Trajan's the serif font, and they've got a bevel and emboss on it. Boom, simple as that. Does it work? Sure. And it was cool the first time. I didn't care for it the other 285 times after it. But no, it'll work on anything. All of these will work on anything. It's just, does it look right? Now, for a neon effect, again, I'm not saying that you can't choose Rockwell, make it work. When I do the demo, I like to find something that looks like neon because neon, like I said, I didn't know this either until my type 1 teacher was doing typography in neon. And he told us that he was trying to do separate letters, and the guy that was like helping him was like, you can't do that. It's got to be one consistent tube. All right, so one thing that's going on here is if I'm really nitpicking here, okay, is this piece of type. That O doesn't actually touch that R. So if I'm really trying to do neon, I need to improve the tracking a bit. So instead of positive 25, let's do negative 10. And now all those letters touch, except for the 2 uppercase. I would have to like literally draw into those things, but here we go. I'm going to click on bevel and emboss. Oof, no good. Turn that off. And let's change the color before I go any further. I'm going to change my background color from red to black. And I'm going to change my type color. I always like purple neon. I think that looks kind of cool. So just take my type and we'll start with a purple. Now the beauty of this, you don't have to plug in like neon purple. I mean, I guess you could, but it helps to like have it pulled down a little bit. And then from here, we're going to double click effects. We're not going to use the bevel and emboss. We're going to do an outer glow. And we're going to do an inner glow. Just so you're aware, inner shadow and inner glow, and outer glow, inner glow, outer glow, inner shadow, drop shadow. Oh, I see. Inner glow and outer, no, inner, I'm confusing myself. Inner glow and inner shadow can be the exact same things. It's just you change the blend mode. They set that up for you, which I guess is kind of nice, but they're the exact same thing. So we've got inner glow. Let's start with outer glow. All right, it's set to normal. It's got a low opacity and it's yellow. So let's rank up the opacity some. And let's do the spread and the size. All right. Right now the noise is up pretty high. Let's bring that down. All right, so boom, there you go. And if you're trying to do like a cheesy late 70s movie, you're probably close to it. However, I know that neon does not emit light that's not the right color, so I'm going to choose this. And this is kind of cool. These effects know that if you hover outside of the color widget, the little Munsell color picker here, it turns to the color picker, and then I could just sample that purple. All right, there we go. So that's working okay. Couple things, it's too bright. It wouldn't give off that much light. So now we can start to pull down the opacity. And when it comes to and this is not gospel, but it's more often than not the rule. When you're applying effects like this, particularly outer shadows and outer glows, adding a little bit of noise is a good thing. It just gives a bit of tooth to it, and it doesn't make it look so artificial. It doesn't have to be much either. I'm just going to put like 2. You might not even notice a difference, but there is like a slight graininess to it. Okay, technique, precise, softer. Let's fade with soft. And then now we're just going to play around with spread and size. That looks terrible. That's like a much sharper glow right there. So these are just kind of like pulling back, pulling forth until you find kind of what you're looking for. Okay, not bad, but I think it's hurting the legibility. So I'll pull that down some, see if we can do a little bit more with the size. Okay, think that looks okay right now, but I think it's the inner glow that's really going to kind of make this thing hum. And if you guys ever wanted to make a lightsaber, the exact same thing, only just don't use type, just use a line. All right, let's do the inner glow. Inner glow, it's set to screen, that's good. Here's where really the biggest difference, it's the source. We're going to want it set to center, but I'm going to stay on edge for a second so you can see what's going to happen. I'll pull the opacity all the way up to 100, and now it's choke in size. So if that's what you're looking for, great. But this is not. Like neon does not like this way. The hottest part of neon is always in the middle. So we're going to change the source to center. There we go. Size. You got to be careful. Like size, a little goes a long way. Maybe something like that. Now I'll pull the opacity down until it looks better. Choose OK. Now that's a very down and dirty way of doing it. Now that I'm looking at it, this probably wasn't the best typeface for it because I lost that outer glow on some of the thin ligatures here. But you get the idea that the hottest part's coming from the inside, it's radiating out, and it's casting its own light source. So a couple different ways to use type effects. For this project, you do need to use layer effects, whether it's on type, entirely up to you. It can be on shapes, it can be on other elements of graphics, but usually students will put these on type, and that's fine. I mean, this is the first project that you got to work with type, so if that's where you want to put it, by all means, go ahead. All right, any questions about any of that stuff? You guys can unmute. I see them, like I've lost myself on this one. Do we need to cover that in any more detail? Because if not, I would like to real quick talk about how to use smart objects, and then I'm going to stop recording. How does everyone feel about that? We good? In the meantime, guys, go to Blackboard, pull down the exercise files, not the exercise that will be graded. I'm not going to assign that tonight, but I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's housed under resources, second one down, mock-up, poster advertising. Grab those 2 files, open them up in Photoshop, and follow along with this. I'm going to trash this out. Everyone feel comfortable enough with layer styles?
I'm sorry, my computer is freezing. Could you repeat? We're following along with the layer styles.
Um, I would like you guys to follow along with the smart object. It's in the class resources. So download that PSD and download that JPEG. It'll look like this. This is the PSD. This is the JPEG. Open these 2 things unless you've got one already, but it might make more sense, especially if you've never done this before. Get these 2 files open in Photoshop and follow along. I want to show you guys how to apply these. I'll save this. Close this out. Give you guys a couple seconds to do that. But how does everyone feel? We're okay with layer styles? I mean, it's not the wheel. I understand that, but I don't want to discount it if that's brand new to somebody. Is anybody having trouble accessing these files? I'll put your next exercise out on Tuesday, and I'll have your last exercises graded on Sunday. Outside of that, I think everything is up to date with your grade book. Okay, so here's what we need to do still tonight. We're going to do this smart object demo. We're going to take a break about 8 o'clock. When we come back, I will not record anymore. I'm going to talk a little bit about Tyler Stout, some of his work, and then I'm going to walk you through the different ways that you need to save all the facets of this project, because this one's a little bit different. We're going to be saving out, can't remember if it's 4 or 5 different ways. Everything that you've been doing up to this point has been a PSD, and you've been doing a great job, and you will continue to submit a PSD. But in addition to that, you're going to give me a couple different file formats. So we need to talk about those. All right, that brings us to this.
By the way, is this gonna be for a grade, or can we do this for fun if we want to join up and do the demo with you?
The demo is not for a grade. This right here, I'm not going to grade this, but you're going to use this for your project, your real project, and that is part of your grade.
I know how to do mock-ups, so I think I don't need this demo since I've done a lot of mock-ups before.
Okay, that's fine, but this is the time to ask questions. So if you're good on it, great. But if it's not present for the critique, then it's going to be a problem. So if you know how to do it, awesome.
Professor,
Yeah.
for some reason I can't find it. Where is it again?
Let me make sure it's not hidden. It is under resources. So you drop down resources on Blackboard, like right on the landing page.
Oh, yeah, got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So pull down those 2 files, download them, and open them in Photoshop. And I'll wait a minute or two. I can't say enough good things about mockups. I love them. I love them. A lot of my students are big into sports and fashion. So to see their designs on a t-shirt, a hoodie, a baseball hat, hockey pads, whatever, soccer shorts, it just, they really, really like it. And like it kind of, if I'm having trouble connecting with the kid, usually I'll give them a mock-up and be like, hey, well, check it out. Just write your name, skin it on a mock-up, and suddenly they're like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool. For you, though, this is a professional look to your portfolio. No, I mean, like hardly anybody anymore just has flat versions of whatever it is, be it a logo. We do a lot of branding. So let's say that we're branding shoe company. Great, like you give us a logo that's just floating on a black background, okay, and or you give us an advertisement for Coca-Cola, the best caffeinated drink for athletes. Okay, great. You put it on a can, you put it on a billboard or a poster or whatever it's going to be. It just looks so much more professional. It's like clients are sometimes very myopic and they don't really see it, especially in an environment, until you show them what it could look like. The way that this was done before mockups is you would literally go out, take a picture of a billboard, go into Photoshop, select the billboard interior, dump it out, put your design in, skew it, try your best to match the lighting, try your best to like extract a tree in the foreground, and then put the tree back in. Man, it was a big pain. And then I think what happened was a handful of designers said, you know what? I could do that. I could just take pictures of wine bottles and boxes and laundry detergent, and I could just cut everything out and save it as a smart object and sell it for $5. because, you know, some designer doesn't have time or doesn't care to do it, or maybe they don't know photography. And that's what happened. So, you know, they started making money, and then more people started making money, and well, you get the rest. All right, let's get into this thing. So this PSD is a Photoshop mockup, and good mockups will have the layers named for you, and really good mockups will have a lot of different layers for like lighting effects too. Let's see how this one's done. We've got a black and white layer. Not really sure why we got that. Oh, so this black and white layer is set to soft light. Let's see the blend mode up here. If you turn it off, it's just a little, it's very warm in this environment. This black and white is down to 30% opacity. And if we double click on it, I think what they've done is they dipped some of the yellows down. And they have, yeah, so they took down some red and yellow. They just cooled it down a little bit so it didn't look so in your face. That's cool, makes sense. But if you really want that look, just turn it off. So there's a little bit of lighting effect. This layer says your design here. Double click on layer thumbnail. Great, pretty self-explanatory. What else do we got? We've got an effect. What's inside of this effect folder? We got a clipping mask. 2 clipping masks on this smart object poster. These are going to be lighting effects, I can tell already. So if you turn one off, you see how that is just a glare. It's made to look like there's some light bouncing. And because this poster seems like it's got a bit of like a bow, like a convex to it. I think that's convex when it's going out towards you. That lighting effect makes it look like that edge is catching that light. So that's cool. And this one's probably a shadow. And it is. So right here, if light's coming in at this angle, this little piece right here would be casting a shadow. And that's what that is. So that looks good too. And then this is the poster itself. All right. Let's go ahead and let's drop our image into here. So there's a couple different ways you can go about this, and they're all right. You could just enter the PSB right now and then duplicate a layer into it. I think it's faster to do this. So let's take this image from Aliens, and I'm going to hit Control A to select all. And once I hit Control A or Command A, you should see the marching ants going all the way around. So Control or Command A, and there it is. Selection. Now what I want to do is I just want to copy it into memory. So that's just going to be a Control C, Control or Command C. Kind of done with this right now. I could close it out, but I'll leave it open for a second. One thing that might happen though, I noticed that this is a CMYK document. I got a feeling when I paste this in, it's going to say, hey, just so you know, the image that you're pasting into has a different color profile. Are you okay with it? We will be, but that could happen. All right, let's go back to our indoor advertising. Just hit the tab, and right on the layer, just like it says, and this is why I say that these are better than some of the other ones. It tells you, hey, your design here, double click on the layer thumbnail. Do that. You see this little icon in the lower right of this thumbnail? Here, I'll make it a bit bigger. No, I'm sorry, it's as big as it can go. That little icon is a smart object. It's got a little square, kind of looks like a piece of paper with a dog-eared edge. And then there's another teeny little square on top of it. Those are smart objects. So if you double click on the layer thumbnail, you've entered what's called a PSB, as in Papa Sierra Bravo. Not a PSD, but a PSB. What is a PSB? If you take an Illustrator, maybe you're familiar with groups, and you know that you can have groups within groups. Or if you've maybe used After Effects before, you could have nested compositions. This is almost like Russian dolls, where you can have something inside of something, and it could go like this for a long way, like something inside of something, something inside of something, something inside of something, and you just keep peeling this onion back and open and back and open, or go the other way, just keep collapsing it in. We are one layer inside of the PSD. That's what this is. That's the reason that smart objects are smart. Not only are they scalable, but they can have nested image inside of it. So our image, the picture of the girl with the gun, should still be copied into RAM. So if we hit Control V or Command V, it's in Victor, there it is. Now, if you like the crop the way that it is, awesome. I kind of want to see the whole poster though. So I'm going to hit Control or Command T as in Tango. And I'm going to grab the handle and just scale it down some. And look at that. It's almost a perfect fit. It's a little bit, got to scale it up just a little bit, but that looks pretty good. And I'll hit enter to apply that. All right, easy so far. So big deal. You know, what does that mean? Well, if we save it, and we're going to save it, just hit Control or Command S. The magic's already happened. We just haven't seen it yet. Now all you got to do is close out of this tab. So just X out or Control W. And just like that, your image is now applied into that smart object. And that's all that we need for this. That's all I need for the mockup. You can use this file for your mockup, or you can find another one that works better. I've got several. This is just the fastest one I can find, but this one will work just fine. So we want to see a contextual version of your design. That's it. How do we feel about that? Does that make sense? And if you want to change things, just go back, double click on the smart object layer. Now I can say, all right, that's cool, but what if I inverted it? Control I. I got to save it again. Got to save it. Control W, and there's that. Pretty simple. Should we go through that again, or did that make sense? I mean, it's recorded, so you guys can always watch the chat whenever you want, but any questions on that? I think your next exercise will probably be smart object oriented. It might not be a mock-up, but it probably will have something to do with like nesting images within images. No questions, final take, final thoughts, final takers. Okay, then it's 7:51. I'm going to stop recording.